In my experience, the misconduct exhibited by the West Mercia Police Force was both blatant and widespread. Out of numerous officers, only 3 demonstrated honesty and respect, whilst the rest were highly involved in lying to my face, with many instances documented in black and white. This pervasive dishonesty led to significant failures in protecting the children and it resulted in continued harassment and abuse. The police failed to act on reports of child abuse, and they put my children at risk. And today marks another day where the continuum of abuse was profound. One notable example is Officer 1, who ignored detailed abuse reports, mishandling non-molestation orders, and providing inadequate support during a period of homelessness and abuse. This officer's conduct exemplifies the systemic failures within the police force. It just highlights the urgent need for accountability when it comes to victim blaming. On the 20th of November 2023, I left my home with 3 children after enduring 4 years of abusive behaviour. That evening I discovered that the abuse was extended now to my children, and I swore no threat of suicide would ever make me return. The following day I disclosed an extensive history of coercive and controlling behaviour, harassment, child abuse and other crimes to the call handler at West Mercia Police. I was disclosing so much in detail that she documented on the report that it would need an officer to attend. The officer did attend, came to my sister's property to discuss why I had removed myself and my children from home. During this conversation, the current and historic abuse towards myself and my children was disclosed. I provided evidence to show this officer what was going on, including messages from the wife that he flew to China to marry after meeting on the internet, the ex-partner for 10 years, who had lived through absolute hell and once again had lived with the threat of suicide constantly. I provided evidence of the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse, the harassment, threats, the begging to come back, the financial extortion, the financial abuse, isolation from my family, mind games, everything. Being threatened 13 times with suicide if I didn't do as he said or take him back. Rocking up at the house, drink driving because I didn't want to take him back after I'd paid £30,000 for a house deposit in a property, after he'd gaslit me constantly, making me believe that he wasn't having an affair, it was in my head. And then he flew to China and had this one was Hungary, and had the affair. Then, because I wouldn't get him back, he'd come and rev. So then he would go and rev outside the house. Told this officer that I had to attend the park the first year our son was born. I had to take my baby to a cold park to exchange Christmas presents with my family, because if he didn't get his own way, his mental health would dip. But he would then use that against people, because as he says, it's not his first rodeo. He knows what to say. He's used these tactics with many people. He has a pattern of behaviour his family wouldn't have him back in their house. I disclosed drug cultivation and distribution. This is harassment as well, the constant messages, 60-something messages I had that day. That is something I found when I came back into the house when he eventually left. Constant. I even disclosed that he would say that I had cost him his job. But that's a lie. The year that he had an affair, I did email his boss. After, like I say, I'd paid the 30 grand to move in this house. Then off he went on his business trip for his affair, and I fainted and bashed my head on the fireplace and ended up in A&E. I now know that's called trauma response. But what I emailed his boss wasn't bad. That's the thing, it wasn't actually bad. But the girl that he was having an affair with, telling his boss that they were having an affair, that was probably what did it. But he'd lost his job a long time before then, because he failed to attend a work interview on conduct for 6 months. That was a long time before his affair. And that is what he says about his boss. Here we go. So this is what I get all the time. No anchor, have mercy. This is how he always did it. Just bring it back. But 14 months later, and he was still having information leaked to him. To the family court, and that was witnessed. Despite the disclosures made to the officer that night, and as per the Home Office guide, there was already an extensive pattern of behaviour. Neighbours had phoned the police to check on my welfare. The midwife had submitted a report that was on my medical records. The police had been out in 21 when he was, and they'd arrived to him at home drunk. They breathalyzed him and put him in his car that night, and then he shouted up at the window all night accusing me of depriving him of basic needs, the toilet and water, because I'd arrived home to him drunk with a minor, and I mean a minor. It wasn't one, the little one wasn't one at the time, and he wouldn't let me hold the baby, and he was hammered. So when the police arrived, they escorted him out, and that was me depriving him of needs. There's incidents there of him going missing. There's the first incident in 2020 when I phoned the police because he wouldn't leave my house. We'd only been together 6 months, and he wouldn't leave me alone. So there's all these things, all these links together. But what the officer did that night, instead of documenting anything, he gave me advice on contact centres and how the man that had abused me and 3 children could see a child. And then he left his laptop and came back in the middle of the night and gave me advice to not leave my kids with the next door neighbour. Now he states that he didn't do any of that. He's innocent. But there's no body-worn video footage at all. At all. And it just makes me worry. It makes me more than worry. Because once again I face the wrath of the continuation of abuse. But that's only me, and that isn't the issue here. The next is, my children disclosed the abuse, and he failed to even act on that. He didn't document anything. He did nothing at all for an 11-year-old who had been put through hell by this man. I didn't know that the 13-year-old was also going through it at the time. My 11-year-old did write some notes the night we left. And then on the 24th of November, 3 days after the disclosure was given to this specific officer, my son wrote a statement to attach to a child arrangement order for the family court. That statement is here. It was signed and witnessed by the wellbeing lead. Now I would really like to know everybody's opinion. Is this child abuse? Because according to West Mercia Police, they followed every avenue possible. Every avenue possible. They interviewed 2 boys that had waited for 5 months because of the failings of PC officer number 1, who hadn't documented any of it. So they waited all those months to sit through video interviews. One of them has autism. Nobody even thought to ask him anything at the beginning. But this 11-year-old is a completely different child now. He used to be in the top set for everything. He excelled. Early in the year, when the breaches of the non-mole weren't being acted on, I came home from playgroup and I hadn't announced my entrance, and I went straight upstairs to the toilet. When I came out, this 11-year-old was stood at the bottom of the stairs with a knife. He was petrified, and we went to the GP and he was referred to CAMS. His brother, who was 2 years older, on the 3rd of March last year, slit his wrists. None of them could understand, because at 13 years of age, with autism, he knew that his stepdad had done wrong, and he would say things like, "It's okay, we'll be safe soon, because we've told the police now. We've told the police." What followed this officer is absurd, and it scares the life out of me that this is happening to other women and kids. There is so much that I will eventually share, but this one is where it started, and I'm not going to take this officer right to the end of what's happened with him, because I would be here about 10 hours, so I'll do this one in a few steps. This is my children's voice, because I've not had a voice through family court, through the police. Nobody's given me the chance to defend anything or to actually put facts or anything together. It doesn't add up. And everybody didn't know this man, everybody from his past, everybody that knows him, just, it doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense, other than the fact that his uncle used to work for the police and was very high up in the Met. That seems to be the only thing. Early in January, 2 months after I disclosed this, my West Mercia IDVA asked me if my ex knew somebody in the police force, because he had breached the order 5 times and nobody had done anything about it. Now, this is my son's voice.
When I first met Gabriel, he was really nice to me, and he was like that until Matt was born. After Matt was born, he started being a dickhead, such as not letting me see Matt, telling me to go to my room whenever I wanted to play with Matt. Recently, in the past year or two, he barges past me. I think he knocks me with his shoulders on purpose. When I try go down the stairs, he will stand in my way, so I have to go back up, and calls me a dickhead. Sometimes when I go and make myself breakfast, he moves my stuff out the way, or just moves me, or just say, "Move along then," in a rude way, like he just wanted me gone. Sometimes when I had her baths, he would tell me to get out so him or Matt could go on the toilet. Mum moved me into my brother's room because it has a toilet, as he kept making me get off the loo when I was not just having a wee. Who cares if I've finished? One time when he came home from nursery with Matt, I was watching something, so he grabbed the remote and turned it off. When Mum fainted and I called him, he just told me to ring 999 and then hung up. He is really mean to Nate, at one moment being kind, then the next being a complete and total asshole to him. I hate it when I go try have a play with Matt and then he tells me to go back to my room or tells me to fuck off. He sticks his middle finger up at me. Nate told me Gabriel called me a fucking cunt. He tells me to fuck off, but I didn't hear that time. I always hear him and Mum arguing. I went up to check my mum one day as I was scared he had hurt her when I saw him and Matt. When going to school, I tried to hold Matt's hand and walk with him. Then Gabriel told me to go to school when I still had like 20 minutes to get there. When I was playing with Matt once by swinging him upside down, and Gabriel walked in the room and said, "What the fuck are you doing?" and threatened to do that to me in a very aggressive way. He flips me off and calls me a cunt. I feel like I can't go in the living room to play with Matt or Snowy because I think he'll just yell at me or tell me to get out. Sometimes 1am too scared to get a drink, so I text Mum and ask to get a drink. Once on my birthday when Matt was little, He was extremely drunk and we had to stay in a hotel away from him. When we were walking home on he almost caused a crash between a car and Matt as H almost pushed Matt into a moving car. Nate got so scared he ran straight home crying, and when Mum got home she took us to our grandma's house until later when she went home and Grandma looked after us. Since Mum started her new job, she has rang on multiple occasions to ask if Christian's awake. When I get home from school, WND most of the time has passed out on the bed. She asks Nate to as he picks Matt up from nursery. One time I found him out cold with Matt in his arms, so Mum took us away. Whenever I walk in a room or I sit at the table when Mum's there, he just walks out looking angry. He swears at me when I go in the garden. I used to go into Mum and talk, and I don't now because he is there and laughs whenever I speak or shakes his head. Mum secretly got my uniform and some stuff in the van Monday with some stuff for Matt and Nate. She told me to be quiet and get in the van. Nate wasn't listening but came to we sat at McDonald's. She told us she needed a break from it. We went to the Travelodge. When we were there, Nate told her about Gabriel calling me a fucking cunt when she was at work, and she asked me what else was happening and I told her she was cross. I hadn't said anything to her or a teacher, and she phoned a woman for help. I think it was the middle of the night. We haven't been home since, and she said he will never be a dick to us again. Jack, Matt's big brother.
Now I completely understand that he's not bashing them about or sexually abusing them. I understand that. That's never ever something I've said or claimed that he's done. But I've got 2 traumatized kids. 2. One that will show no weakness in front of men anymore, who was so thin he was leaving half-cooked chips on the stairs for them. He wouldn't let them have food and water. They are basic human rights, for Christ's sake. Access to the toilet. So where's the level? What's the line? What do West Mercia class as abusive behaviour? Or because he said he didn't do it, they thought, oh, we won't go and talk to teachers that had noticed changes in behaviour, early help who had already been harassed by their stepdad about the youngest, who had identified the pattern of behaviour, or the nursery manager who'd raised a safeguarding. No, but we'll get onto that investigation eventually. But that's my 11-year-old. That was the statement that he wrote. He wrote that in support of his younger sibling and what he had been through. So it might not be bad to some people, but it is something that I would never dream of doing to my kids. Just shows he just steps up. But that was disclosed to PC number 1. Now what is even more concerning is PC 1 documented nothing. And yes, I did raise on the 21st of December 2023. It was my second meeting with this officer number 1. By this point he had no involvement at all in the case, and I had a second officer. Little did I know how he was connected to officer number 1. Anyway, they came into my house and they sat and they told me that the CPS categorically only take WhatsApps and text messages from a 6-month period as evidence. That's it. So even when I cried and asked Is that really what the CPS only take? Why can't they speak to their exes? He abused somebody for 10 years before me. Why couldn't he speak to the woman from China? No, they couldn't, because they categorically only take WhatsApps and text messages from a 6-month period as evidence. That's it, categorically. I asked my investigating officer, the young lad, if this was true. And I will always remember, because he looked straight up at officer number 1 and then stared at the floor and said yes. I wrote this diary entry that night. And why would I be writing in a diary entry that is time-stamped about contact centres and exactly what I've just said all that time ago, if that isn't what they said? He did give me advice on contact centres once again, which was helpful. I couldn't understand it. I asked the officers that night if it was going to take him psychologically abusing a person to the point of suicide, for them to take what he's like seriously. Because the damage that man does to people is profound. But unlike him, not everybody threatens it every 5 minutes to get their own way. Would they ever take it seriously? So as they had very kindly offered for me to forward them the non-molestation order, it's not the done thing, I was told in December. I did when they came. I had 2 non-molestation orders, one that didn't include the children, one that did. So when the breaches happened, contacted the police, the nursery contacted the police, my mum contacted the police. 5 breaches. When the 4th one happened, it was to the nursery. The nursery manager contacted them, and the police told them that I would need to do it myself. So I did, and nothing was done. The only thing that was done was, despite my mum waiting in all week as advised by the police and nobody attending the property, officer number 1 decided to take himself to the nursery. He signed in, it was witnessed by staff, and he misquoted the non-mol, which was funny because he was quoting the non-molestation number 1. The only 2 people that had that one were my ex-partner and me. I had forwarded the police non-mol 2 that contained the children. But he also gave my nursery manager a talk on contact centres for the 3rd time about my child. Thankfully, my nursery manager was more than aware of the content and corrected him and asked him if he had the experience to, was he qualified to be able to establish the risk to a child. He also informed her that none of the other breaches would be going anywhere anyway. His wife's a competitor in our area, and I'd love to know how he had seen non-molestation order number 1. My hair was falling out by this point. I'd lost 4 stone in 2 months, and I was still vomiting everything I ate. I spoke to the domestic abuse risk officer, the DARO, on the 19th of January, who said that all of the breaches were breaches. Whether my ex had been served the right order or not, they were still breaches. They should have been dealt with. The woman's aide, Idva, from West Mercia, phoned me on the 19th and asked if my ex knew somebody in the place. How naive was I? I didn't believe he did. With his history, didn't think it would be a positive influence in the police anyway, but yeah, roll on 16 months, we know that that's now true. Not true. But anyway, I collapsed that night. My kids had to take me into bed. and the little one had to go. The impact of what this officer had done was profound, and the consequences have rolled on since. They really have. But it was for that reason, the fact that he was now extending his biased views and impacting my children's safety once again by attempting to intimidate my nursery manager, that made me raise a complaint about his conduct, which I did. It's now March 25, and I raised that complaint on the 19th of January. So much has happened since. So much sick things have happened since. I've met 3 officers. 2 of them were investigating his complaint, and 1 that is investigating his sergeant, who was arrested, falsely accused of grooming me on the 28th of May, who also has close links to somebody within Christian's family. But anyway, last week I received a letter. This is surrounding officer number 1. In November 23, you made a complaint of C&C against your ex-partner. He made a counter-allegation. The matter was subject to an investigation by PC. In December 23, he reported that he did not think the matter met the threshold test for prosecution. The matter was reviewed by his supervising officers, and in January 24, a decision was made to take no further action. You made a complaint about the lack of police action, and referred it back to PC roles as supervision to reconsider. Now, I do not understand how they can lie so much, not only to your face, but on black and white. It's in paper, every lie, there's so many. PC here in December, in January. So why does the crime report say on the 23rd of November 2023 he NFA'd it, no further action? So he did not investigate it. He did not refer it to a supervising officer in January, as he's saying. He NFA'd it in November, a few days after I'd disclosed everything. That's all he did. Well, on top of all the father's rights speeches. But I don't understand how they can just lie the whole way through. There is so much more that comes with this officer. So much more over the next 16 months. And it's going to take me another couple of PowerPoints to get through all of his. But I'm going to move on to number 2 next.